What's going on, everyone? Today we're here with Dr. Dennis Kimbro. Now, Dr. Dennis Kimbro has been featured on many publications at CNN. He has been featured also in Ebony, and definitely a lot of respected places that Dr. Kimbro has been. He also speaks to many people across the country about finance. And one area that we really need help at in the Black community is in the area of finance. So, Dr. Kimbro, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Kimbro, for people who don't know much about you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, the backflap story is I've been at this game for more than 25 years, written 5 books. My first book, Think and Grow Rich, a Black Choice, 1 million copies in print, and recently translated into Japanese. That's a story all by itself. When they sent me a couple of copies of Think and Grow Rich, Black Choice, written in Japanese, I said, I'll take your word for it. I can't read this, but I'm honored. That's a bestseller. My 5th book, The Wealth Choice, is a bestseller. But all I wanted to do before it was said and done, I wanted to go around the country, interview successful African Americans, and try to ascertain the answer to 2 questions. Question number 1, why does one person succeed while another fails? And question number 2, why is one person rich and wealthy while another is impoverished? So I had more interviews than I can count. You name them, I guess I probably interviewed everybody from Condoleezza Rice to T.D. Jakes. And no matter the individual at hand, I found 4 common chords that all successful African Americans had in common. Number 1, they dreamed big dreams. They had a dream, a passion, something they desperately wanted to accomplish in life. Number 2, they were inner-directed versus outer-directed. In other words, they weren't so quick to believe well-meaning friends or family members who said, you can't do this, you can't do that. They walked to a beat of a different drummer. Number 3, they dedicated themselves to lifelong learning. You don't go to school, as I tell my students all the time, you don't go to school one period of your life, you're in school every day of your life. I have a sign in my classroom that reads, if you don't read, if you don't study, if you don't grow, if you don't develop, if you don't go to the seminars, you don't go to the workshops, you don't take in the information, somebody out in the universe will. The day you meet that other person, you lose. And then last but not least, these men and women flat out refuse to fail. As Confucius says, a man or woman is great not because they haven't failed. A man or woman is great because failure has not stopped them. Now, these platitudes, these traits, these qualities, these characteristics, you can call them mother wit all you want, simplistic all you want, but those are the only keys to success that I've ever met.
Now, let me ask you a question about with Black people just not even understanding money. Why do you think that we have just not even a working knowledge of money?
Well, that's not a true statement. We do understand the power of money. We just release it in the wrong communities. We know the power of money. There are about 175 countries that belong to the United Nations, and we are number 16 in terms of GDP. You know, our buying power is excess of $1 trillion. I mean, you look at the GDP of the United States in totality, it's $17 trillion, and we are almost 1/10. We are 13% of the population, but in terms of buying power, we're 1/10 of the U.S. GDP. So the problem isn't that Black people are poor. No, the problem is that we're broke. We're broke because we give our money to everybody else. We do what other groups refuse to do. When you look at the East Indian community and what are East Indians known for? Hotels, motels, food franchises. The average dollar stays in the East Indian community 45 days before leaving it. The average dollar stays in the Asian community 24 days before leaving it. The average dollar stays in the Jewish community 19 days before leaving. Well, the average dollar stays in the Black community 6 hours before it's turned over and leaves the community. So the problem is that we don't understand it. The problem is that we don't do what every other group does, and that's buy within, release that buying power within our community like everybody else does.
What are the factors that contribute to Black people saying, I just refuse to practice group economics?
Well, you know, all the marketeers know that there are 5 different marketing, buying hotspots or promotions. And you can always tell when Fortune 500 or when Wall Street is using a buying emotion directed at Black Americans. If you want to hit white America, you got to talk financial security. So just close your eyes and listen to the words that they use. You're in good hands with Allstate. Keep your family secure for the future. Ameritrade, Edwards Jones, whatever. Well, the buying emotion that if you want to reach Black America is about recognition. As a group, we've been kicked to the curb, we've been thrown on the bus. Everybody turns their back on us, so we've gone through life unrecognized. So what do we want? We want recognition. So what are the words that all the marketeers in Wall Street use? Be the envy of your community. Be the first on your block. For the first 5 callers that call in right now, we will give you an added bonus. Well, you know who they're going after? They're going after Rhythm Nation. Why? Because we want and we hunger for recognition. We are the only group that'll take money that we don't have to buy something that we don't need to impress somebody that we can't stand, and I don't care what it is, and we do it repetitively. So, once you understand the buying emotions and once you understand the driving factors, well, we can change it.
Now, the thing that bothers me the most, and we've talked about this many times in different discussions, is that with us, it's like we so obsessed with the way we look and kind of being vain in a way that we will, you have people that's on welfare, maybe Section 8. And if LeBron James drops some shoes, you'll see them in line like a herd of cattle to go give their $200 to their children when they shouldn't even be putting clothes on the children's backs, but they worrying about $200 shoes.
Oh yeah, we got to turn the volume and noise level up in terms of financial literacy, and that's something that we have got to do internally. Booker T. Washington said years ago, "Start where you are with what you have, knowing that what you have is plenty enough." And when you look at my 5th book, a 7-year study on Black millionaires. These men and women, these are average men and women who set a financial goal and they reached it. And no one put a ball in their hand, no one put a microphone in their hand to do it. Well, that's not the problem. That's not the issue. The issue is, okay, here are 35,000 African Americans who became millionaires, but we don't profile our wealth creators like every other group does. All right, I'm in my study, and here I am on Skype, and I'm talking to you. And if you look at the far corner of my study, you see a flat screen TV on one of the walls. I can give you the remote to that flat screen, and you can turn to the Fox Financial News, you can turn to the Bloomberg channel, you can turn to, any financial network, and you might find Bill Gates being interviewed. You might find an old interview with Steve Jobs. You might hear the latest from, Warren Buffett, from, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, from Howard Schultz of Starbucks. But here's my question to you. When have you ever seen or heard your wealth creators interviewed on TV? Can you even tell me the 6 Black billionaires in the United States? That's part and parcel of the problem. Malcolm Gladwell, I love Gladwell's writings and I have all his books. And he was on a talk show. And the host said to him, Malcolm, in the few minutes that we have left, I got to ask you this question. What trends on the horizon have you concerned? And Gladwell thought it for a second, and then he stroked his face and he said, yeah, there are a couple of trends out there that, have piqued my interest and I'm really concerned about. And the host said, well, in the few minutes that we have left, share them with, our viewing audience. And Gladwell said on that program, he said, I'm concerned about the hundreds of thousands, and then he caught himself and he changed the number, and he said, make that millions. I'm concerned about the millions of Black elementary school children who live in neighborhoods in which they will never see a Black man in a suit and tie. That concerns me. And, what he was really talking about is the context, of success, of wealth creation, and the other, simply because you become what you see. What thou seest, that thou beest. What are the words, what are the images, or what are the concepts that the wealthy think about? Well, they think about wealth, and they think about productivity, they think about dreams, and they think about vision, and they think about persistence. Well, what are the words, images that unsuccessful think about? Well, they think about lack, and they think about scarcity, and they think about, oh, woe is me. The only thing that you have got to do is change the data on the diskettes. We're not physical people having a spiritual expression. We're spiritual people having a physical expression. What does the Bible say? The Bible says the first shall be last and the last shall be first. What in the world does that mean? It means the physical that you have first, put last. And the mental that you have last, put first.
And you were saying about it, that's something that the images of what people see, because, in our community, unfortunately, the neighborhood thug or rapper is looked up to, or going to jail is an accolade. And, but when I speak to a lot of my African brothers and sisters, going to jail and being a thug, they'll kick you out the family. And
without doubt. That's, people say that all the time about Dr. King. What was the salient point about Martin Luther King? Number one, he told us as a race, never compromise your values.
Mm-hmm.
Never compromise your values. You are where you are in life right now by the values that you have set in every area of your life, and don't compromise them. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I'm in the classroom speaking to a group of black millennials, and I'll throw out the question. I'll say, ladies, I said, one day you may want to walk down that aisle and look in the eyes of your soulmate and say those magical words, to have and to hold. Until that day comes, are you going to lower your standards or raise your standards? And they said, Dr. Kimbro, I'm definitely going to raise my standard. In other words, don't compromise your values. And probably the best example of that is Steve Jobs. One day, Steve Jobs was a receptionist who worked in the C-suite of Apple. Now, she's working up on the level of all the executive vice presidents and where Jobs' office was held. And one day she's a half hour late to work. She's a single mother living in the outskirts of Silicon Valley, had an old beat up Volkswagen. And Jobs goes up to her and says, why in the world are you late? And she says, well, Steve, my car wouldn't start. He says, okay. He walks away, doesn't say a single word to this receptionist until the end of the day. 5:45 in the evening, he goes up to her and says, open up your hand. She opens up her hand. He drops in her hand the keys to a brand new Jaguar and says, now never be late again.
Wow.
You compromise your values. I mean, there are 21 personal values, and you got to be the same person behind the curtain that you are in front of the curtain in every area of your life. When you are the best at what you do, you never have to worry about income, and you never have to worry about employment. Why? The marketplace will seek you out. And what is excellence? Excellence is one of the 21 human values.
That story about Steve Jobs, that's something I probably would do for somebody if I had that kind of, funds, because I believe in giving to people. I mean, if you got it, then I believe you should give it. And some people just need help. And unfortunately, one thing I noticed, too, about a lot of us, you speaking about that lady that had a hard time. Pretty sure she was a hard worker, always faithful to be there. So he didn't mind. But a lot of times we don't want to do the hard work or go through the years of sacrifice to get to this, level of success. And this instant gratification is what's killing us.
Well, we can always give. Again, going back to my fifth book, I found the 7 laws of wealth. And the 5th law is, how may I serve thee? Well, that's a giving mentality. Mm-hmm. I tell my students all the time, you find somebody homeless on the street corner holding up a cardboard sign, I'll work for food, I'll work for this, blah, blah, blah. They got the same opportunity of an Oprah Winfrey. They got the same opportunity of a Bob Johnson. They got the same opportunity of a Dave Stewart, one of your 6 black billionaires. My students try to blow me off, Dr. How in the world can they ever? Because anybody can serve. Anybody can be best in class regardless of where your station is in life. Anybody can do more than what is expected, more than what is required. Anybody can go the extra mile. Anybody can wow the customer. Listen, damn it, anybody can make the eyeballs move. And that's the number one, that's the number one task of marketing. What is the number one task of marketing? Make my eyeballs move. If you're a marketeer, you only got two objectives. Number one, grab somebody's attention. And number two, after you grab it, keep it. So anybody can do that. And it all starts with you as an individual willing to serve.
Now, let me ask you about the credit system, because a lot of times, African Americans, we don't know much about the credit system, and a lot of times it comes from home, in my opinion, is that the parents aren't training their children about the system they're about to go into. So they'll get credit cards, just use them up. Credit get bad, then they need something. They want to give them, predatory loans, like high interest.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why is it that we haven't really learned the system of credit?
Well, we've always been behind the eight ball. I mean, you're looking at a group of people who was always, robbing Peter to pay Paul. And, I'm not a conservative and I'm not a Republican, but I know something about personal responsibility. But there's certain things you can't control. Everybody knows that we're the last hired and the first fired. I mean, if you got a steady job, then you can go ahead and put some things in motion that would obviate the fact that one day you might lose your job. But, if we don't know that we're going to be employed, Tuesday, let alone Wednesday and Thursday, there are some factors that are simply out of our control. But here's the statement. Here's some action steps that we can do. I don't care where you are and what is the task that you're doing. The seeds of greatness are in you. And what are the seeds of greatness? Begin to save 10% of everything that you earn. Begin to save 10% of everything that you earn. That is the first step to multiple streams of income. You don't need the latest. You don't need the fashion trends. You don't need whatever. I remember when several years ago I got an email from Deborah Lee of BET, and she wanted me to come out to the BET Awards. And she said she was so concerned about the buying habits of her young entertainers, dancers and actresses and everything. So I went out there and I spoke. And while I was out there doing the BET Awards, they said to me, well, Dr. Kimbro, would you like to walk the red carpet? And I said, yeah, it's okay. I've never walked the red carpet in my life. So I walked the red carpet, and as I walked the red carpet, one of the security guards looked at me and said, man, that is a nice suit that you are wearing. And I said, this suit right here? And he said, yeah, that's a nice suit. And I said, well, yeah, I thought it was a nice suit. My wife thought it was a nice suit. That's why she bought it for me in 1997. That was in 2013. The suit that I wore was 16 years old. Now, I use that as an anecdote. Even my children say, Dad, I can't believe you don't drive a Mercedes Benz, this, that, and everything. Well, I got a nice Lexus SUV. I mean, it's got some miles on it, but I mean, why should I do that? I'm more concerned with building up my savings and concentrating on my multiple streams of income. And that's something that we have got to learn and understand. And like you said, know the value of credit. Begin to retire all debt. Start with your small items, piggyback on your small items, and move up the pecking scale. And that's the only way that we are going to amass. And with the boy that you have in office right now, Donald Trump, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, he's serving notice to 13% of the population and even to people of color. This is as far as the train is going, my brothers and sisters. You got to walk from this spot in order to reach your destination.
Correct. And you mentioned saving 10% of your income, and some people may not like what I'm about to say, but it's fine. There's a lot of black people who are extremely faithful financially to a lot of the churches here in America. And we have been putting billions of our dollars inside these churches, and yet a lot of times we get nothing out of it. And you have a lot of people that's coming out of that now with a lot of frustrations and saying that what is going on with the tithes, but yet they'll pay their tithes and offerings overpaying their light bill or have no savings or anything. And if they would take that 10% that you're talking about and even save it for a year, they will come out so far ahead.
Well, you brought up the subject, not me. There are about 72 to 75,000 black churches in the United States. And of those 72 to 75,000 black churches in the United States, they collect collectively $10 to $12 million a week in tithes and offerings, $50 to $60 million a month in tithes and offerings, and more than $500 million a year in tithes and offerings. Now, I have no problem with that. You worship wherever you want to worship, but this is what I want to say. If you worship at a church that does not have a financial ministry, you might need to find another church, because that is the name of the game, using your financial power to benefit others.
Correct, because we'll see all these churches, beautiful churches, and then you look at the community that's surrounding the churches, and it's like, what's going on here? It's like you're not investing into the community. It's okay if you take in tithes and offerings and whatever, and you creating schools and businesses, and you employing, people as within these communities, but yet they don't do it. The only one who looking good is the preacher, and then everybody else, they don't have nothing. And I just think financially, this is my opinion, we need to stop doing that.
Well, we need to do other things for some. I mean, there's a whole cadre. We need to develop a to-do list and a what not to do list. But the one thing about the church that we really got to focus on, Sunday is the only time in our communities when you can find a sister with an MBA sitting next to another sister who barely got out of high school, got a house full of kids, no financial help, holding up the financial burdens in her home. And we need to go ahead and use that time to connect the dots. In other words, to allow that sister with the graduate degree to develop a relationship with this other sister so she can change that mindset. And that's the beautiful aspect of it. And that's something that is doable in our community. And that's the only time that they will ever be in contact with each other. That one day a week for that 30-minute sermon.
And, unfortunately, sometimes like you said, you could take advantage of so much of that. And really, the churches of old used to take advantage of that time and do all kind of things within the community. You like say, set up a lot of things. So that's why I kind of spoke, up about that. It's just kind of disappointing. But also when you speak about changing, our perception, also home ownership is something that, we all should focus on. But, when you get into home ownership, it gets so complex for a lot of people, especially, Black people who've never been around that. What keys do you have to Black people to possibly where they can obtain a home?
Well, that's the first step to wealth creation. I mean, after savings, it's the first step to wealth creation. And we know that less than 47% of African Americans own their own home. And part and parcel with that is, again, a lot of things occurred out of our control. I know that the first week of February, I got a couple of meetings with Wells Fargo, got a speaking engagement here in the Southeast, and quote unquote, they specifically asked for me. And I'm not going to hold back. I'm not going to beat anybody up. But they need to understand, man, what that has done to my community, simply because somebody wanted to meet quota and somebody wanted to, go ahead and earn a buck. But less than 47% of African Americans own their own home, and we have got to, promote and turn the noise level up about the value of home ownership. Again, going back to my 5th book, I used a full-blown survey, and I asked these Black millionaires, about 1,000 of them, 118 questions in my survey. And one of the questions that I asked, what is the quickest way to wealth in this country? And I asked a follow-up question, what is the best money move that you made? And it both came back home ownership. And, these folks are 7 figures, but they don't have any palatial homes. They don't live in fashion, sumptuous homes, whatever. The appraised value of the home of the average Black millionaire is $300,000. Mm-hmm. But they're making the money work for them. So, and again, it goes back to us taking a tacit effort. We got to hold focus groups. We got to have, community-based workshops in terms of financial literacy, and start at the ground roots and move up. And home ownership is first on the pecking order.
Correct, because we'll have people within our community that will buy $40,000 and $50,000 vehicles and then drive to an apartment with it. I'm like, buy a home first before you buy the $50,000 vehicle.
Oh yeah, again, that goes back to recognition. Got a brand new Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and live in an apartment complex.
Correct. So, also you was mentioning earlier about the sisters with MBAs or different black people. And, I tell, like, especially I have a daughter that's going to be going to college. And I told her that, you need to make sure to choose a career that once you get out of college that you're going to make a minimum, 50, 60, $70,000. But a lot of times we'll see a lot of people just getting degrees, but yet they only getting paid 30,000.
Yeah, that's a wise decision. And here's the thing, in terms of student loan debt, that's a major caveat. I mean, that's not a gap. That's a chasm. That's a gulf. That's an abyss. And I teach at a black HBCU. I mean, the average kid coming out of Clark, Atlanta, is about $35,000 in student loan debt. So that's something that's got to be measured before you even, select the school to go to. But, choosing the appropriate measure, and I know that there are a number of factors that certainly play into that. What do you have an inclination for? What is your passion? This, that, and everything. But I agree wholeheartedly. I tell my students all the time, the goal is not to get out of here in 4 years with your degree. The goal is to get out of here within 4 years, minimum student loan debt, and minimum 2 job offers. Now, I don't want you to stay on that job, but there's something that you need to understand about that corporate experience. There are some positives to that corporate experience, because a lot of times you're not in a position to launch your business 5 seconds after you walk across that stage and receive your degree. And that corporate job right now will, place food on the table, keep, clothes on your back, but most importantly, it'll give you time. Again, we got to start thinking into 2 steps, not 1 step. Thinking 2 steps. That corporate job is not the big move, but it will set up the big move. Why? Because it will give you time to map out your strategy of what you really want to do in life.
Correct. Because, for years I worked in the petrochemical industry, and, but I knew that wasn't for me. And so when we started to look into creating, our company, I still worked there, and I still do what I have to do while I started, doing the business aspect. And, some people feel, well, I'd start a business, I'm going to quit my job. No, sometimes it may not be able to sustain the bills.
Yeah.
At the time period. So, I promote, business creation, because how the corporate world is. You got a glass ceiling.
You're talking to an old corporate act.
Yeah.
I was the first black male, 1973, in the leadership development program at Texas Instruments in Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
I was the first black male in 1981, Smith, Kline and French Pharmaceuticals in their leadership and development program. So I'm an old corporate hat, but I tell my students, I know the shortcomings of corporate America, and if corporate America is that great, believe me, I would be there. But it gave me time to think, consider, to cogitate of what I really wanted to do, and I used that time wisely.
Now let me ask you a question. If a person is, they do have their business going, is making, good funds, but they also still working a job as well, and they may want to go along, say, should I quit? Should I not? When do you feel they should just go it on wholeheartedly and say, just go 100% into the business?
Well, I mean, there are different ways to go ahead and, build a business financially as you got that job. You can use sweat equity, you can bootstrap it. I mean, there are a number of factors, but, probably the best way to answer that question, and a lot of people ask me, they say, oh man, Dr. Kimbro, what is the what is the reason why one guy leaves the corporate job and jumps out there and doesn't make it, and runs back into corporate America, and the guy who leaves the corporate job and becomes a millionaire? And I said, I've seen it all the time over the course of my life. You got one guy working in corporate America for 5 years, gets sick of it, jumps out there, starts his business, and after a year, no one is using his product, no one is using his service. He gets behind on his mortgage, gets behind on his car payments, they're about to take his house, and before that occurs, He blows the dust off his resume and runs back into corporate America. Then you got another guy, been in corporate America for 5 years, gets sick of it, launches his own business. After a year, no one is using this product, no one is using the service, gets behind on his mortgage, gets behind on his car payments. They're about to take his house. But instead of blowing the dust off his resume and jumping back into corporate America, he says, take the house, take the car, I can't do it. Therein lies the difference. One guy is afraid of losing his car and losing his house. The other guy is afraid of losing his life. That is the big difference. When you get to that point, when you know within your heart of hearts, within your soul, within your personal conviction, this is what you were born to do. You weren't destined for that corporate job. A career is what you're paid for, but a calling is what you're made for. When you know within the clear light of day your purpose, why you were placed on earth, that's the time to bolt.
Yeah, and that's some very powerful words, because, you know, the only freedom, in my opinion, for the black man and black woman of America is business creation. Because, you know, on these jobs, how there's so much go on. Like, you look at black women, they are one of the most educated groups in America, yet they don't hold the corporate jobs they should hold, or they're not over the HR department. But yet you have a white female who don't barely got a high school education. She'd be her boss.
Mm-hmm.
And the black woman got master's degrees.
Yeah.
It's really sad. You know, also one business that we need to focus on, I've been speaking up a lot about, maybe you could chime in on it. The black hair care industry, that's like an industry that we should own, but we don't. Why is it that we aren't focusing on getting into that sort of business since we know about it?
You said the hair care industry?
Yeah, the black hair care industry is mostly Asian owned.
There are a number of industries that Black America started and just gave up. You know, years ago, I had an interview with Buck O'Neill. Buck O'Neill, as you may or may not know, was a paragon in the Negro Leagues. And it was even considered that he was going to be the Jackie Robinson. In other words, he was going to be the player that would break the color barrier in baseball. And if it wasn't going to be Buck O'Neill, it was going to be Josh Gibson. If it wasn't going to be Josh Gibson, it was going to be Satchel Paige. And it was none of them. It was Jackie Robinson, and rightfully so. Well, during the course of the interview, we got to talking about baseball, and he told me that he played against Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Joe DiMaggio and all those guys. And I said, how in the world did you do that? You know, blah, blah, blah. He said, you know, during the winter months. During the winter months, the All-Stars from the Negro Leagues would play in barnstorming games against the All-Star from Major League Baseball, and they would play in Mexico and Cuba because it was illegal to do that in the United States. And he told me about the conversations that he had with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Joe DiMaggio. He said the white ball players in Major League Baseball were so jealous of the black ball players. And I said, why in the world were they jealous? He said, because we stayed in the best hotels and we ate in the best restaurants and we were entertained in the best cabarets. He told me that I don't care what city you walked into, whether it was St. Louis, whether it was Kansas City, whether it was Oklahoma City, whether it was someplace in Arkansas, someplace in Mississippi, whatever. The best hotels during the 1920s, 30s, and 40s were all black owned. The best restaurants during the 20s, 30s, and 40s were all black owned. The best, cabarets and, whatever were all black owned. Well, these were industries that we gave up. And the same thing with hair care. I mean, you look at Madam C.J. Walker. For my research, I interviewed Madam C.J. Walker's granddaughter. These were industries that we turned our back on. And here's the thing, they're ripe for the taking now. But you gotta have the right mindset and you gotta have the right team in order, to gain traction within these industries today.
Yeah, brother, because that's a passion of mine, that I'm looking at all these billions of dollars within that industry. And yet, if anybody should be benefiting, it should be black people off of the industry, not only being 3% of the ownership. I mean, that's really sad. And, we have to.
I mean, if black women would stop using L'Oreal would collapse right now. I mean, if we would stop using those products, when you look at the buying habits of black women are 6% of the population but they consume 27% of all shoes and cologne manufactured here in the United States. So, I mean, their fingerprint is everywhere within the fashion industry. If they would go ahead and unleash those dollars within their own community, that would make a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing just to hearing those percentages. That just, that small block of people control that much of an industry.
Oh, without a doubt. Now, hear me straight. I have no problem. You spend your money as you so choose. You earned it, and that is your choice. But if, like I said, 24% of shoes and cologne, then some of the kids who sit in my class at Clark Atlanta, they got to be going to school on full scholarships based off of the leaders in these industries. They got to be going to school on full scholarships. I mean, you look at, I got to have some Chanel scholars in there. I got to have some Gucci scholars in my class. I got to have some Ferragamo scholars in my class on full rise, because that's what other groups do. They leverage their buying power.
And it's the same thing, even politically. We don't use our money to even get politicians in our back pocket. That's why politicians just look over us like, whatever. Let me do a little dance for them. Let me talk like them, and then they'll give us our vote anyway.
You got a lot on your mind, young man. Every year, we elect 9,000 black elected officials here in this country with absolutely nothing to show for it. But you brought up the subject, not me.
Hey, I'm a firm, because, this election, and then what I promote is, we don't have no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interest when it comes to politics. And we have to stop being faithful to a Democratic Party. I don't affiliate with no parties, but if Donald Trump today is saying something that's in my interest or the black community's interest, then I'll listen to Donald Trump or whoever else. That's how I feel about it. I don't have no friend in politics. And we need to create. Why don't we have super PACs? Because we don't have enough super PACs in the black community.
Well, I agree. I mean, and primarily even more so than super PACs, we need to come up with incentive prizes. And what do I mean by that? You go back to the early 1920s, and Charles Lindbergh, who flew the first transatlantic flight from New York to Paris. Yeah, I mean, he wanted to do it for the recognition, but you got to understand, there was a $25,000 price for the first individual who could do that. Now, you look at that $25,000 in terms of that, I mean, it would be well over several $1 million today. Well, we need to do the same thing. We need to get groups and focus groups who can solve some of these latent problems within our community. And then we need to decide what are the best 5 solutions, and then go ahead and fund those individuals and fund those groups to solve those problems. When you look at our community, okay, one third of our community is in poverty, and 1/2 of all black children live in poverty. Well, let's go ahead and come up with solutions for that. Let's go ahead and find out the 5 best solutions, and then fund those groups who say they can solve that. When you look at unemployment has been double. In the black community, the unemployment rate is double that in the white community. It's been that way for the last 40 years. Well, let's find somebody who can solve that problem and fund them, give them an incentive prize. When you look at teenage dropout rates in the black community, particularly with black males, the same old song. Find somebody who can solve those problems and get together. You have 400 black social organizations that will convene every summer. They're going to stay in somebody's hotel, and let's get it all together collectively, throw their money into a pot, and say we are going to fund these 5 groups because they've come up with the best solutions, and let's fund them for an entire year to put these babies to rest.
Correct, because I looked at just recently. Jill Stein with the Green Party had wanted to get a recount, and she was putting out there she needed about $2 million. And, when she put it out there, these people came together and got this woman over $2 million in 24 hours, because I kept refreshing the counter and I was watching how the money was coming in. Now, as black people, we spending over $1 trillion a year. What is so hard for us to say, you know what? let's build this business district, or let's build this subdivision, or let's build schools. We definitely need schools. I do a lot of reports on how you have a lot of these, white supremacist teachers literally being Klan members to our children, and yet we won't do it. So what is stopping us from, investing in ourselves?
Mindset. That's what's stopping you. You need to, what does the Bible say? The Bible says repent. The Bible says to tell them that means change your mind. Without getting spiritual on you, whenever Jesus would walk into a village, whenever he would come into a little town, whatever, and he would heal the sick, he would heal the homeless, he would heal those who were impoverished, he would heal those who were depressed. And every time that he would heal these individuals, the last statement that he would make, he would say, go and sin no more. Well, sin doesn't mean that you took the last cookie out the cookie jar. Sin doesn't mean that I stole this woman's purse, whatever. It doesn't mean that. Sin means to change your thinking, that you were wrong in the errors of your ways. Because if you don't change your thinking, the next time I ride into this village again, you're still going to be depressed, you're still going to be homeless, and you're still going to be poor. The greatest gift your Creator has ever given you is the ability to change your mind. Is the ability to change your mind. How old was John Newton, the slave owner, when that slave ship was halfway across the Atlantic and he gets down on his knees in the middle of a storm? He tells his captain, something's wrong with this picture. We got this cargo of slaves in the belly of the ship, and we only allowed them to come up on the decks of this ship, for about 10 or 15 minutes every 30 days, and we throw salt water on them, and then we throw them back into the bows of the ship. Captain, take this ship back to its original port and release the cargo. How old was John Newton when he fell on his knees and wrote those amazing words, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound? He was 24 years old. Repent, change your mind. But you're never going to do that until you get out of the state of denial. Now, I was on a radio show recently, and the host was talking about Black Lives Matter, white police shooting cops, and brothers, this, that, and everything. And she asked me my take on it. And I said, well, we're in the midst of a perfect storm. She said, what do you mean? I said, on one side, you've got a criminal justice system that has zero regard for black lives. That's what you have. I didn't say no regard. I didn't say low regard. I said zero regard for black lives. And then on the other side, you have a race of 34 million people of African American descent who are in complete denial about the state and about the plight of black males. Complete denial. I mean, the issue isn't Black Lives Matter. The issue is, do Black Lives matter to black people? That's the issue. That's the conversation that we need to have. So that's the perfect storm that we are in. Until we get out of denial, nothing will change.
Well, a lot of them are waking up because, the information that we put across the news reports, in our program, because we are definitely centered on a lot of issues in our community, and even people within the world has been telling me as well that they've been seeing the different things and how we all have literally the same problem worldwide, unfortunately, within the African diaspora. That's just, really, it gets to me sometime to hear that, but we try to, like you say, hopefully change some minds. But, one last question I want to ask you when you talk about black millionaires. A lot of times people say, well, why don't they try to help their brothers and sisters that's below them? Why they kind of just make theirs and then you don't see them anymore?
No, they do. They're involved in so many organizations. You can't sell them short. And as a matter of fact, they've done what we needed them to do. They broke the glass ceiling when we talk about wealth. Their example, they bring out, what their example is showing us. We'll take a look at the best and brightest from a standing start. These individuals from an impoverished setting showed us what we can do with a dream. We take action on it and we make it into reality. I mean, you look at the profiles that I put in the book. Oh my God. I mean, Bob Johnson of BET. What in the world was Bob Johnson doing when he got the idea from BET? He was working for the federal government for $15,000 an hour. I mean, what in the world was Dave Stewart doing when he got the idea for worldwide telecom? He was working for peanuts in the telecommunications industry. There I am with Donahue Peebles, and I'm interviewing him, and I'm throwing out an icebreaker. And I said, Don, I said, how does it feel to be the black version of Donald Trump? Well, he laughed. He found out that joke was pretty cute, but underlying it all, it wasn't cute at all. And I could, feel it in his impression. He said, Professor, that's a good question, but you need to ask Donald Trump. How does it feel to be the white version of Donahue Peebles? And I said, explain. He said, when I got into the real estate business, the closest that I got to real estate was my grandfather was the doorman of the Marriott Hotel in Washington, D.C. But when Donald Trump got into the real estate business, his father bankrolled him to the tune of $600 million. Then he said, Professor, you do your homework. Who started off at zero and who didn't? So, I mean, they're a shining example if we would just take the time to read the book, to go ahead and ask the critical questions, to believe in yourself when no one else will, to get a dream, to decide that you will not be poor, to thy own self be true. In other words, find your area of excellence and pour your whole heart and soul in it, to make your money grow, to pay yourself first. My books aren't about cash. My books are about courage. It takes courage to come up with a dream. It takes courage to pursue a dream. It takes courage to find a new set of friends because your personal friends that you associate with are toxic and they don't enable you. So that's the bottom line. They've done everything that we need them to do.
Correct. I mean, that one thing that you said right there is you have to say, I'm not going to be poor, because that's one thing that I said to myself. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, crack cocaine, gangs, all kind of stuff. Right. And I looked around that one day as a child, and I just looked up in the sky and I said, God, if you allow me the health and strength and the knowledge, I refuse to stay here and have kids in this environment. I want to make some of myself. Yeah. And we still definitely a work in progress, but I'm not in that situation. Not at all. My kids are doing, good. They're in good schools. My kids don't know nothing about gang members and the local drug dealer and, police that's robbing drug dealers and fooling with prostitutes. And they don't know anything about that. So, that's something that I feel everybody should decide within our community. Refuse to be involved in those environments.
Yep. Refuse to be poor. Well, my brother, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I had a great conversation with you. Tell all your viewing audience they could reach me at www.denniskimbro.com. My 5 books, you can go to Barnes & Noble, Amazon, get them right now. The Wealth Choice is the #1 business book in Black America right now. 7-year study on Black millionaires, and I guess I will forever be known as the author of Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. And I am a professor in the School of Business at Clark Atlanta University. So I'm honored to be on your show. Thanks for having me, and call me anytime.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kimbro, for spreading all this knowledge that a lot of us need, because finance is something that we really need to get a hold to. So, Dr. Kimbro, you have a great evening.
God bless. Take care.